Hello and welcome to the Group 6 presentation for the Business Engineering 605 course project. We will begin the presentation by introducing the project client, the scope of the project, followed by some key aspects of the project execution. Next, the project results will be presented and we will conclude with discussions and recommendations on lessons learned. The project's client is the Teachers Without Frontiers, TWF. It's an organization developed by Idare Talim Wagahi, an NGO with a focus on comprehensive education and learning reform. TWF provides development opportunities for teachers that allow them to use IT resources as part of an overall blended learning strategy. The organization aims to provide world-class teaching material to disadvantaged educational institutes at no cost. Our team was tasked by Teachers Without Frontiers to identify information technology-based resources that would facilitate in achieving Grade 9 English student learning outcomes, established by the Ministry of Education of Pakistan. There are four competencies that make up key learning areas: reading and thinking skills, writing skills, oral communication skills, and finally, formal and lexical aspects of the English language. These competencies are further broken down into standards and benchmarks, and finally to individual student learning outcomes. The four competencies together form 112 student learning outcomes. Resources had to be collected for these 112 SLOs. A number of constraints and requirements were set. The resources had to be free to access without complicated barriers such as subscriptions and/or payments. They had to be as interactive as possible, with preference given to educational games. They were also required to be accessible through a web browser or through an Android device. And finally, they had to be appropriate for children, free from religious and sexual content. An overview of the execution and management process of the project is provided in this section by discussing a few key aspects. The project team consisted of 6 members, led by the project manager, who oversaw all aspects of the project from start to finish. Reporting to the project manager was the quality manager, in charge of quality control and assurance, content manager, in charge of collating and organizing resources collected by the team, schedule manager, ensuring tasks were completed at their allotted time and deadlines were met, research manager, who oversaw the actual collection of the resources, and the communication manager, who acted as a bridge between the team, the client, and the project sponsor. The project was broken down into individual activities using a work breakdown structure. Each activity was defined, prioritized, and sequenced. The project deliverables had to be submitted to the client on a weekly basis. The student learning outcomes were broken down into 7 batches, with each given a week's time to complete. A weekly cycle of work was established, and a typical cycle is illustrated here. On Monday, a weekly team meeting would be held, where the team would be briefed on the week's activities and tasks would be allocated. Once a new batch of SLOs were allocated, then each team member would have until Friday to find their resources, whilst the quality manager would perform daily quality control checks on resources as they were submitted and logged into the content register. The final quality control is performed on Sunday. This would mark the end of the cycle, and the week's resources were submitted to the client. Quality control and assurance was a critical aspect of executing this project, and it's worthwhile to take an in-depth look. To streamline the process, quality control was delegated to all team members responsible of collecting resources, not just the quality manager. Furthermore, the quality manager conducted quality assurance checks using quality assurance criteria such as relevance, ease of access, and regulation to ensure compliance with the project constraints and requirements. Any resources not meeting these criteria were rejected by the quality manager and had to be replaced by team members. Only after final approval by the quality manager would the resources be submitted to the client. It was identified early in the project that clear communication would be key to the project's success. The project manager served as a hub for all information exchange with the client and the project sponsor to ensure expectations were clearly communicated to the team. The communication manager also set guidelines for internal communication between team members by facilitating multiple channels such as in-person meetings, emails, and instant messaging services depending on the nature of the message to ensure the project execution ran smoothly. We were able to collect 596 resources for 112 SLOs. These were collected over a course of 7 weeks. This figure illustrates the accumulation of resources planned versus actual results. The collection went largely according to plan. The variance is mainly due to SLOs for which no resource could be found, and this is discussed later in this section. The resources collected can be categorized as games, charts, tutorials, videos, worksheets, and teaching materials. And here is a couple examples of the type of interactive resources we provided the client in fulfillment of the student learning outcomes. The team strived to place more emphasis on categories that were more interactive and hands-on. This is reflected in the results. The leading category is games, constituting 53% of resources. While the team aimed to collect at least 60% of the resources as games or other interactive sources, this was not possible due to nature of the English grade 9 syllabus. An in-depth look at this issue is provided by this figure. It can be seen that for competencies of reading and thinking skills and formal and lexical aspects of English language, the team has been more successful to reach at least 60% of interactive resources, whereas for oral communication skills and writing skills, the goal could not be achieved. Teaching writing skills is by nature an interactive process, and this is reflected by the number of interactive resources available. Oral communication, on the other hand, is better taught using resources such as videos and audio, hence few games could be found for them. The final and main focus of the team had been to ensure resources are found for at least 90% of the SLOs. This figure illustrates the percentage of SLOs for which resources has been found both overall and broken down by competencies. Overall resources has been delivered to the client for 80% of the SLOs. The 10% shortcoming from the project goal can be understood by scrutinizing the results for each competency. The learning process of reading and writing are inherently practice and hands-on based. These learning outcomes can be achieved by repetition under supervision of an instructor and cannot necessarily be aided by online resources. Overall, the project team has had a successful result despite setting ambitious goals. 596 resources were collected. The target of at least 6 resources per SLO has been met and exceeded with 6.6 resources per SLO. While the ratio of interactive to non-interactive resources has been aimed to be 60%, it was matched closely by 53%. And finally, resources has been found for 80% of all SLOs, whilst 90% was targeted. Despite exceeding or meeting the project requirements, the process was not free of hurdles, and each has a learning opportunity. A few key issues pertaining to this are discussed in this section. There are many good sources that require payment for access to learning material, which disqualifies them for this project. Unfortunately, these sites would allow usage for a short time before prompting the user for payment and registration. Such resources were routinely mistakenly submitted to the quality manager. The quality manager had to spend extra time in vetting and rejecting these resources, resulting in a higher than necessary work volume. For future projects, we recommend setting up a domain blacklist. This list would be prepared by the quality manager as he or she ran into domains that was of this nature, and anytime a new source was identified, the blacklist would be updated. This list would be available to all team members collecting resources. This would result in increased productivity. The second learning came in terms of streamlining SLO search efforts. The team found that many SLOs were not search friendly, meaning that simply looking for them through a search engine did not yield many suitable links. Additionally, unlike other subjects that were broken down by unit, like math, biology, and chemistry, English language SLOs are broken down by competencies and benchmarks. This type of categorization, along with the nature of English language learning, meant that there were a number of overlaps. This issue could be resolved in future projects if the content manager identifies and assigns keywords to each student learning outcome. These keywords would serve the dual purpose of yielding more effective search results and enabling quick identification of overlapping SLOs to ensure the team's time is conserved. This concludes our presentation, and we would like to thank you for your time and extend our gratitude to the TWF team and Dr. Carr for this incredible opportunity.